SignalR and more with Brady Gaster.
The Azure DevOps Podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Each show brings you hard-hitting interviews with industry experts, innovating better methods, and sharing success stories. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your host, and make sure to check out www.azuredevops.show for past episodes and show notes, and continue to be excited about the user group community all around the country and the number of people, the number of groups that are doing virtual user group shows. And I've been talking at a lot of them. I've got Tulsa on the schedule coming up quick, and then Trinug, and I think at least one every few weeks from here on out. But if you're running a .NET user group, I'd love to speak for your group over video presentation. I'd love to get on your schedule, so just reach out and be happy to do that. And also, if you're tuning in for the first time to the podcast, this show is for developers who are shipping software with Microsoft technologies. And my goal for all of you is to be able to move fast, deliver quality, and run your systems with confidence. And let's get into the show. I'm really excited about my guest today. Brady Gaster is with me, and he's a senior program manager on the ASP.NET team at Microsoft, where he works on SignalR, microservices, APIs, and integration with the Azure services teams, in hopes to make it exciting for developers who work on the .NET apps to party in the cloud. Brady, welcome to the show. How are you, my friend?
Doing good. How are you doing? We've had this one a long time coming. I think we talked about doing this at Ignite the last time we had an in-person event. So
yeah, November. No, it's good. It's good. Awesome. Well, and actually at Ignite, we did a little bit. I was one of the community reporters there, and you were on the conference live stream doing a little bit about SignalR.
Yep.
And you've gone so deep in SignalR over the past. Maybe we should catch up on that. What's the state of SignalR now? And I think there's probably a lot of developers still not using it, and they need to get on the train. But what's the current state of SignalR, and how has it changed in the last year or so?
Wow, it's I would say in the last year we've really done a lot of polish on a lot of the upgrades that we recently did. I mean, the product has a great history. Fowler and Damien on the ASP.NET team, now the ASP.NET Core team, now the .NET team. They kind of had this idea way back when you and I used to have to do things in long polling style. Back when WebSockets weren't necessarily a ubiquitous thing like they are today. And you always have to hand it to both of those guys. It's like they can read the tea leaves and see what's coming. But they said, we know WebSockets is going to be a thing. We've heard from devs forever that they don't want to have to hit the refresh button. We also know that WebSockets is not going to be around in a ubiquitous manner for some time. It's funny to look back on it now. It's like about a year and a half after that prediction. But they also knew that WebSockets wasn't going to be the last thing that enabled real-time HTTP. So they built SignalR as essentially an abstraction on top of various ways that you could do a real-time connection with HTTP. So, if WebSockets are there, it parties on WebSockets. If WebSockets isn't there, either on the server or the client side, because it has this negotiation concept we'll talk about. If you don't have WebSockets, it'll essentially negotiate a downstream way to transport. So if WebSockets aren't on, it'll try server-sent events. If the server or the client don't support that, that's a problem. Then it defaults to long polling, and it kind of goes down from there. So, essentially it'll just kind of try one thing and downgrade to whatever transport will actually work based on the browser or the client. Most times it'll be WebSockets or server-sent events these days. But like if you're running an app service, you do have to explicitly turn on WebSockets. You wouldn't have to change your code. So if it's using SSC today, then you check the box. it's using WebSockets, your code continues to run. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've personally been amazed with SignalR and just the ease at which you can get essentially push notifications in any application, and you use your imagination what you could use a push message for.
Oh yeah,
because the uses are endless.
It's nuts. There's a gent, I think you might have had him on the show or talked to him at some point in the conference circuit. Dan Rosanova. He used to work in Azure Compute and Messaging. He and I made a pretty exciting trip to Finland together for a conference a couple years back. And I really like the way he kind of summed it up. Dan's always been, a big enterprise messaging, dev. And he said, I kind of perceive SignalR to be that last mile technology. And for me, that really summed it up because, a lot of people, when they see SignalR, they immediately go, oh my gosh, I could use this in every single thing I've ever built. I'm going to go back and just add it to every piece of software I've ever written. Don't do that. Don't do that. SignalR is a great tech, and it ends up looking like an Uber hammer. And people start thinking, well, I don't have to use REST anymore. No, you do, because lower level devices can't maintain that constant connection. And when that constant connection breaks, you have to reestablish it. So, the one thing I like to tell folks is SignalR is as durable as is the transport underneath it. And in the what we call OG SignalR, the .NET Framework SignalR, we would do some interesting things around kind of queuing up messages that didn't get delivered and then redeliver them. That has a pretty large memory footprint. So we turned that off and we effectively rewrote SignalR under .NET Core. David was, pretty busy driving the entire core framework. So Andrew Stenton, Nurse, and the team kind of stepped up and they said, let's rethink this. So that's kind of when they redid SignalR for .NET Core. And not only doing it in core, they came up with the idea of establishing or creating essentially a SignalR protocol. So our protocol spec is actually public. It's in GitHub, and you can go read it. And we've actually had folks like David Justice from the Azure SDK team at one point came along and he said, hey, I was reading your spec and I started working on a Go client. And he had a, kind of quasi-functional Go prototype client for SignalR in about a weekend. Now, he's a really smart cat, so, for him, It wasn't hard. But it's cool that we actually started over and got that spec written, because now people have an open spec they can use for any language if they wanted to write a client or a server. So that's pretty exciting. So,
yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, I remember the very first time that I used SignalR, and some of the things that I remember just kind of having to figure out. It wasn't quite clear. Mm-hmm. One of the ones was strong typing against DTOs, or in the application, I'd want to have an actual message, which is a C# type, right. And then I want to say, I want this to go across SignalR over to the client, which happened to be C# and .NET as well, right. And then have that C# type, because it had access to the same library, because there's two components of the same application, and just be DTO through SignalR to DTO. And then I realized, okay, it's strong typing in the hub and in some cases, but it's not actually strong type all the way through. Can you talk about what people need to watch out for there?
Sure, I can. Now, it's less true in the core client than it was in the OG client. And the OG SignalR, we had this concept. I used to have great conversations with our mutual friend John Skeet about dynamic in C#. I didn't really get dynamic in C# until I started using SignalR. And in the beginning of SignalR, that was kind of it was kind of a cornerstone piece. You could throw anything into a SignalR message for the most part, as long as it could be serialized to a string, and it would fly. Today, with the new one, in SignalR, we have this concept of invoking and handling, and the way you handle is on. With on and the .NET client for SignalR. Now, I'm not talking about hubs. I'm talking about the client itself. You can literally say on and then pass it a series of generics. And then when
the hub connection.
Lambda, the hub connection. When you do hub connection.on, you can literally pass in a series of generic arguments. And then when you open your curly brace, your Lambda is all of those parameters. So on the client side, you have a little bit more flexibility, but you're also kind of inferring, you know what I mean? Like, you're going to be getting back a person object, you're going to be getting back an int or a string. So it's weird when I've seen a lot of folks do this with SignalR. If they go to clients.all.send, they sit there and they think, what do I pass it? And I'm like, pass it whatever you want. The only thing that's weird is that first parameter can be a string. So that's where people get a little hung up in this concept of magic strings. Like you basically say clients.all.send, and then you pass it, save person or receive message. And then the next argument is the list of parameters you want to send that method. So then in your client side, you would essentially say hubconnection.on, and then you'd pass the name of this, the name of the event you expect to get. So with SignalR event handling, it's very similar to JavaScript event handling. However, that was mainly true in the framework version. With Core, we added a couple of hub subclasses. So the default is still the dynamic. You know what I mean? You can still use it. I think it's actually called a dynamic hub. So if you wanted to use a dynamic hub, you can, but you can actually inherit from what's called a hub of T. And the interesting thing about hub of T that always kind of confuses folks is essentially if I've got, chat hub, and chat hub inherits from hub generic argument, like iChat client, you have to think about that thing you pass it as the client, not the hub. And that can trip people up, because inside of your hub method, you'll say clients dot, all. And then when you hit your dot, because you've inherited from hub of T, you'll see the client methods hanging off. So that's when you get your strong typing, but it's strong typing from the hub to the client. On the client, you're still going to have kind of that string trickery, unless it's a .NET client. If you're a .NET client, you can actually pass in that it's a iHub context of T, and then it implies itself as that client interface, and you have more strong typing. But we used to have this thing in SignalR framework called, what were they called? Hub proxies. We had this concept of a hub proxy, and you could actually hit a URL and get the entire JavaScript representation of that hub. That was very limiting in one way. It was only JavaScript. So that was kind of a problem. And sometimes it would only be .NET. But it was more like you're just generating the client code that you then use on the client. Whereas with the new SignalR, it's more, we've got a protocol agreement between the client and the hub. So it's definitely more of a lower level thing. I hope that answers your question. Yeah. At first, it was weird for folks because it was strings and dynamics, and that was real hard for folks to adjust to. What it did for me was it helped me understand Node better, and it helped me understand other languages that like use dynamic better, and why I would care. Up until that point, I was like, no.
Yeah, right. Well, with Blazor, I have a feeling that it's also the people who've never used SignalR before, it may cause them to use SignalR for the first time, not just because Blazor server side kind of uses it under the covers, but because more people, this is a prediction that I have, and you may have a different opinion too, but more people are going to be doing more rich stateful applications just because it's more available. If they reach for a SPA application and now they start adopting WebAssembly, well, now you have something where you need to call out to a web service when it's a client invoked action, but there's plenty of opportunity for a server invoked action, and that push via SignalR connection is the ticket. So I think there's going to be a lot more SignalR adoption because of this Blazor trend. What are you seeing anything? Are you having conversations around that?
We're having tons, and I had not thought about it. I had not thought about it from the perspective of a prediction, because it always felt like a foregone conclusion to me. But I do like that you're making that prediction, and I want to let you push that. So I totally agree with you. And one of the reasons is, and I'm not, you have primarily Microsoft audience here, so I presume you have primarily .NET developers. That's
right. This show is for .NET developers. We're unabashedly proud of that.
I like that. That's good. That is one of the things that I think was a little weird about SignalR in the beginning, was that, we didn't necessarily, it was like a .NET thing that also spoke JavaScript. We were trying to figure out how to put it in other languages, but there were a lot of nuances that were still .NET-y.
Yeah.
When the protocol concept came up, and then later the Azure SignalR service came up, the need for having multiple clients became not only easier because we have a protocol spec, thank God, thank you, Andrew, but it just made more sense because now we've got the service, we've got more customers. And at the time, we actually had some cloud advocates who were saying, we want to try this in Java, we want to try this in JavaScript, we want to try this in Go, and we don't have clients for us. And we actually were working on them, but it's just a matter of like, once we build those clients, we have to support them too. But I agree with you because when we did, I think it was 3.1.2, it was whatever we shipped around build for the WebAssembly, when WebAssembly kind of went real with Blazor. At that point, Dan Roth's blog post actually included a discussion about using the .NET client for SignalR. Now, when you use the .NET client for SignalR, you have that capability of being able to strongly type more stuff. So it becomes a lot more fun. I've recently switched a lot of my stuff. Like I got picked on because I actually rewrote my blog engine in WebAssembly, which is like the exact canonical version of something you don't want to do. But it's great. And I did it to use Blazor and SignalR together. Well,
as a proof of concept, it's your blog.
Exactly. And we've actually been using that in some workshops because it doubles as a workshop tool. And, we love to build content at Microsoft. So we've actually been using it for some of that too. But we've built a lot of things like real-time dashboards. We have a dashboard that I'd love to redo in Blazor. It's the dashboard that you use if you know that we're putting out a new version of .NET and you want to see how long it takes to get on, like you want to see when it lands on the fabric. So we actually monitor the rollout. So you can see when each SDK lands in every region and app service. So we thought about redoing that because that's dashboarding is a perfect canonical example for SignalR, and Blazor clients as a dashboard is an even more perfect idea. Imagine a Blazor WebAssembly client that you package up as a PWA, and whenever you open it, it just establishes a SignalR connection back to the server, and you start getting messages. It's perfect.
Well, the Azure Application Insights live metrics is kind of streaming that. Are they using SignalR or at least WebSocket?
I believe they are. We've lost count of who in the Azure portal is using SignalR and not using SignalR because there's a lot of different ways to do real time. As you know, SignalR is still the best, obviously. But
it's the simplest. It seems
so easy. It's on and send and invoke. You're done. But we have seen a lot of partners use it. LiveShare uses it for some stuff. There are a couple of, don't know if I can talk about it. There are a couple of really interesting Windows features that tie to your phone that use SignalR in really interesting ways. One of the new things that we added in the 2.2 era and then made better in 3 was streaming. So you can actually, it's no longer an event-based thing. It's an open pipe. You probably heard about iAsync enumerable. You can literally do an await for each. You can do that, and your SignalR connection just waits, and start looking for things to come in. And we've seen some customers using that technology. We saw a phone, and the phone had a special Teams client running on it, and there was a microphone plugged into the side of the phone, and it worked like a CPU using SignalR. So there's all these experiments that people have done, and you've heard about my MIDI experiments. I got Joel Martinez down in Orlando. He's a musician as well. So he and I and Pete Brown started talking about, Pete's heard me talk about this for years. I think you have too. Taking MIDI signals, then serializing the MIDI signal, and then putting it on a SignalR hub and letting it pop out to a client. You could do visualizations. You could teach people how to write music, et cetera, et cetera. Joel came in one day and he had a prototype of it. So it's we mind melded for a weekend and built some stuff out. We had our MIDI devices screaming at each other. It was fun.
And the possibilities are endless.
It's crazy. But I fall back to, SignalR is one of those things that it's got its place. SignalR is not service bus. SignalR is not,
it's not guaranteed delivery.
Right. So I would just always keep that in your mind. We have investigated ways to do that, but we haven't done it yet.
Well, the way I've talked about it with some of our developer clients is that even the difference between TCP and UDP. Now, TCP isn't guaranteed delivery, but it checks to see if it failed and has auto retry. So tons of stuff is built on TCP, whereas UDP it's just like fire, and if it delivers, it delivers, but we're not going to check to see if it did.
Right.
You know,
right.
it's like it's the different levels of guaranteed and even check and retry. They all have a different purpose depending on what you need.
And Fowler actually has some. They're public. They're in the ASP.NET repo. If you look in the very large folder labeled samples, you'll find it. Fowler has a great example of using SignalR with TCP instead. So you can imagine the implications of that. That
faster, right?
Yeah, really fast. So
nice.
imagine like SignalR streaming over raw TCP. Yeah, so there's a lot of experimentation going on.
Nice.
Yeah, it's fun.
One thing I was experimenting recently was just seeing, like for instance, seeing if a Amazon Fire TV stick would support SignalR. And, you know, they have a built-in browser, and actually there's also a Firefox app that you can get, but the built-in Silk, you know, Fire TV browser can do basic stuff. And I loaded up a Blazor app that has some streaming via an additional WebSocket via SignalR, and it worked right out of the box.
Oh, cool.
And I'm thinking, wait a minute, if you do, you know, there's the Java application SDK for Fire TV apps. But if all you do is have a web browser control in it, given that the built-in web browser supports it, now you have a solution for all kinds of digital signage or dashboard stuff that you can just sling to any arbitrary TV with a stick on the back.
That's crazy. I can give you another example of that right now. Have I ever seen you Streamer?
No.
One of our devs built it. He hates it when I talk about it. Go to Streamer, and it's named like every other SignalR demo with just an R, no ER.
Yep.
Streamer.azurewebsites.net, and just click on my stream.
All right, for you listeners, I am watch stream. Oh, okay. So what I'm listening for, Streamer, STREAMR.azurewebsites.net, and I am seeing a picture of Brady translated into ASCII art right on my screen. This is insane.
Isn't that cool? And you could do it too. You could literally like put in your name and do your own stream, and then I could see your stream. That
is pretty awesome, and it just connects to the default webcam, I suppose.
Yeah. Now I'm watching you.
Right.
I can see you twice. It's cool. I can see once in ASCII and once in real.
That is pretty cool. So you want to go grab your latest ASCII avatar or whatnot?
Exactly. Well, that was kind of neat.
That is pretty cool.
Hanselman actually did a little customization of that app in I believe it was an Ignite demo. It might have even been the same Ignite. One of the PMs on my team, PM managers actually, Daniel Jacobson, his team had some spot demos they wanted to do, and they actually added support for the rear camera. So in their demo, they were videoing the audience. And I've told them this like 5 times, but I'm still waiting for that pull request. So.
Yeah, there you go.
Many thanks to our podcast sponsor, ClearMeasure. ClearMeasure is a software architecture company that empowers clients' development teams to be self-sufficient, moving fast, delivering quality, and running their systems with confidence. Whether starting a new project or developing new technologies or techniques, ClearMeasure sets up your team to deliver world-class results. Learn more at www.clearmeasure.com. ClearMeasure, empowering software delivery.
Well, you've been doing a whole lot more than just SignalR. But before we get off of that, one just tip, because when you press the F12 DevTools and you're looking at WebSocket connections and you say, oh, okay, there's a bunch of gobbledygook. I need to be able to sniff. What is the go-to tooling to be able to sniff the messages and the data that's going back over the wire?
I can't talk about that right now, but it's the tool you're using eventually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or
no, the tool you should be using, Edge.
Well, sure. So with the Edge and any of the browser's DevTools, we can sniff the WebSocket, but it's hex or it's binary or it's base 64, but it's not something that's easily understandable. Is that ignorance on my part, or is there something new coming out?
It's absolutely not ignorance on your part, because essentially, WebSockets it's constant. It's constantly streaming signals. You know what I mean?
Right.
for our signals with SignalR, that should give you an idea where the name came from. We can either send it over JSON or message pack. So you can bounce stuff out that way. Last week was this great week at Microsoft called Hackathon. And there is a nifty product or nifty feature inside of the DevTools experience for Edge Canary called Network Console. And Network Console will give you the ability to, how you could load up a web page and that web page might hit a REST API behind it.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You could basically open up Network Console inside of your DevTools in Edge. Now you have to go and check the box because it's an experimental feature in the Canary version. So it's experimental inside of experimental. Your mileage may vary. But you can essentially replay any of the REST calls that you've made back to the server and see how they work. And you can edit their contents. You can literally test your API in the browser. And if you use, I didn't know this existed, but you know how in VS Code you can do Command or Control Shift P to open up the command palette? Mm-hmm. You can do that inside of Edge too. They have commands inside of Edge. If you do that Command Shift P experience inside of Edge DevTools and you type OpenAPI or Swagger, it will actually ask you for a Swagger URL and you paste in the Swagger URL and it will interrogate it and give you a test of harness for the entire API. So nice. That's already in Edge Canary today. They haven't made too big of a deal about it. I think they talked about it a little bit at Build. But there was a hackathon project last week where we're experimenting with that same kind of a concept with WebSockets. And what I saw was pretty exciting. It was effectively being able to interrogate that message and figure out what's going on and maybe do stuff with it. I don't know where the project's going to go. Like I said, it was a hackathon project. You never know how those are going to end. But I did see a demo. Fowler and I saw a demo and we were immediately IMing one another with ideas. So right. There's a lot of stuff one could do with a WebSocket testing tool. That'd be pretty exciting, especially when built in the browser. That'd be nice.
All right. So for you brave souls out there, install Edge Canary and go check it out and follow it. And I think everybody's going to need something like that as more and more information. We just need to see, hey, debugging. Did I send the right thing?
Right. Now, to be clear, if you install Edge Canary, there was nothing in there with WebSockets. It was just a hackathon project. There's probably a lot of work that needs to be done on it. But you can do Network Console today. Network Console will enable you to test out your REST APIs and to, bang on them and make sure things are working. And then in the API space, we've also got, if you're more of a command line person, we've also got the HTTP REPL. It's a .NET tool. That will essentially give you the ability to CD through the various API endpoints that you have and do test calls. We showed that in Jeff Holland's keynote at Build. Kind of integrated with Visual Studio. If you're doing any API dev, you want to try that thing out and give me feedback because I PM that too.
Awesome. Well, so much more to cover. What is this thing called end to end?
End to end. Oh. Wow, that's a big concept. So Azure has a lot of support for, non.NET languages. We love .NET, but there's a lot of other communities out there that want to bring their stuff to the cloud. And with Azure, we've sort of identified there's kind of 4 main languages where people are kind of partying in Azure. .NET's obviously, one of the larger ones, not the larger one. But there's also Node, JavaScript, TypeScript, depending on your flavor. Python is definitely making a huge play in Azure. And then Java. There's a lot of enterprise Java work and, Java Spring, et cetera, et cetera. So what we've been doing in the developer division at Microsoft is, we've heard a lot of feedback from, each language has a community, a variety of spiciness. So we get a lot of feedback and the cloud advocates, we talked about Shane before the call, there's a lot of cloud advocates like Shane and Anthony, who's going to the functions team, and Burke and some other folks, Simona, but they're out there and they're really getting great feedback from customers and they're providing that feedback through various systems as issues, and these are essentially experience issues. So myself and a few other PMs, Brian Holt on the JavaScript side, Asser on the Java side, and Dan Taylor on the Python side, we all basically rat hole on our language and how developers experience building apps using that language on Azure. So we literally will come up with scenarios. One that I was discussing last night that's canonical across all languages is I need to build. I'm a full stack developer, and I'm a team of one for insert reason here, and I'm building a database powered web application. You can imagine the myriad of possibilities with that just in the .NET ecosystem. But then when you add the various languages, forget about it.
Right.
And each one of those has a different set of challenges. So what we do is we talk to a lot of customers. I spend a lot of time talking to customers. It's very exciting because I can just get on Twitter and ping a customer and say, hey, let's talk. And then we do interviews where we actually have people come in and they go through labs and they try stuff out and they give us very candid feedback. And then we take that candid feedback to the engineering owners and we say, this is what we're seeing, this is what we're hearing. Are you seeing and hearing the same thing? And once they get a confirmation, it's like, oh, we should probably prioritize this work. So there's a lot of folks who are just really looking at the community differences, if you will, for each one of those languages and how they, the difficulties that they have moving their stuff to Azure, and we're trying to help developers have, an easier path there. And what's interesting is when you start to look across the systems, you see things like, database powered full stack web app. Then you see database powered full stack web app with an API in the middle. Right. And if you start to,
and then one little offline job to go with it.
Exactly. So you start to see all these patterns emerge, and when you see the patterns emerge, you see the pain emerge. So, we're just really going deep on that stuff. So if you're out there building I'm obviously the .NET representation. So if you're out there building .NET apps and using Azure and you had something weird happen, let's talk, because I want to make sure that we can help you improve that experience. And, if there's a workaround that what it is and we make it more visible to you, but if there's not, that we talk to people who can make change.
Okay. So just reaching out to you on Twitter, is that really the official channel or?
Yeah, I think you know the answer to that.
Okay.
The official channel to reach Brady Gaster for the most part. So,
there you go.
Mm-hmm. But that's been a lot of fun because I get to, we talk a lot about the changes that we've had to endure over the year. For me, I talked to Amanda Silver about it one day and she asked how everybody was doing. And I said, for me, I feel like my team has gotten bigger. And I also feel like my team has gotten more transparent. It's like it's easier to figure out all the stuff people are doing when they're a phone call away versus having to go all the way down to the first floor. I'm kidding, but or across the building 27 or whatever. So that part of it's been really good for me and for a lot of the folks that I work with. Obviously, there's a lot of emotional stuff in there too, but it has been good because we've really fanned out, I think, and we've had a lot of collaboration since March internally. It's been really exciting, but a lot of that collaboration has also been done with customers because we're working 24 hours a day. Customers are working 24 hours a day. So if we're up, we just reach out to them. Kind of weird, but it's been really fun. So,
yeah, that is cool. Yeah. We'll include the Twitter handle in the show notes, and it's at Brady Gaster, BradyGaster.
You could probably throw a rock at any of the social media network and find me there too.
Yeah, awesome.
LinkedIn's in. So, but yeah, that end-to-end stuff has been fun. It's been great.
Well, what are you spending your time most on these last few days and weeks?
The last few days and weeks. I would say since throughout most of the summer, I've really gotten back into the OpenAPI space and started to concentrate a lot on what's going on in the REST API, development ecosystem for folks, or if REST is a religious term for folks, I'll say HTTP API. So we're looking at creative ways we can use OpenAPI and Web API and the different stuff in .NET to enable things like Fusion development or citizen dev apps, so that folks that are building Power Apps, for instance, could actually extend their Power Apps using Web APIs in .NET. So we've added some features inside of Visual Studio 16.7 previews out already, where if you're using Swashbuckle, a way to generate, if you're not using Swashbuckle and you have REST APIs, I highly encourage you to look at it. There's also NSwag. But our features light up with Swashbuckle for the moment. They'll probably light up with NSwag as well later. But if you've got any kind of an ASP.NET Core project that you've got Web API controllers in and you add Swashbuckle, when you right-click publish that now, we give you the ability to use Azure API management. And with Azure API management, you get all the stuff like being able to dial things in with Power Automate flows, with logic apps. You get better throttling. You can control access to your APIs and set up customers. And those sorts of things. So we've actually found that once devs get their APIs in the Azure API management, there's a lot of crazy stuff they can do with it. So we're trying to make that a lot easier for folks now.
Okay. Now, with so many different applications, you'll have a web service, whether even if it's just a simple an API controller, and okay, great, now I've got a web service, and you have to think about, well, if I'm going to put this on the internet, I need to make sure that not just anybody can call it. So I need to have some type of authentication. And with all the so much change over the last number of years, what is the current state of what's the best state of the art now? If I mean, just for the simple cases, hey, I'm going to throw an API controller into my application and I'm going to enable that. Unless people have specific scenarios, what's the best go-to combination of tools and techniques and authentication in today's day and age?
Wow, well, best is always loaded.
Simplest.
Simplest.
Where people can just get it working, but they're not going to shoot themselves in the foot.
I can definitely tell you that since November, in November, we kind of had this big meeting of the minds on this Power Platform, Power Apps plus .NET plus Azure kind of concept. And we identified this one of the things end-to-end PMs do is they break stuff. So, I broke a lot of things in a couple of weeks and had a lot of recommendations and made those recommendations to some great leaders in the company. And they liked a lot of the recommendations. And as usual, that they had some extra ones too. But one of those was auth. Auth is hard, period. End of conversation. And it's not a bone to pick with anybody or any one company. It's just auth is hard. You have to take it seriously. And we had some, let's say, opportunities in the ASP.NET Core templates and with the Active Directory clients. So we kind of looked at some of the samples that they had, and we said, if you had a NuGet package that made enlisting in your identity technology as easy as this sample over here makes it look, everybody would be happy. And they said, well, that's interesting because one of the packages in that sample is actually a reusable package that we gave to people to, give them guidance on how to do this in a more easy way. And I said, you thinking what I'm thinking? So they, the Active Directory team, the identity team now, they productized that sample package based on some feedback from the illustrious Barry Dorans, the ASP.NET identity guru, or curmudgeon, as he likes to be called. So we got together and we gave them some feedback, and they went and they built some stuff out. And now I think I've got a slide deck that we showed in one of the end-to-end reviews where it was, here's how you handle jot bearer tokens today with Active Directory code. And it was like the code just went off the screen. Like it was trying to make a point. Here's how you do it after Microsoft Identity Web. And it was 2 lines of code. And there are actually 2 lines of code that you could guess pretty easily from IntelliSense that hang off of the add authentication method in the ASP.NET Core middleware. So it's exactly where you think it should be. And that's something that the identity team has already shipped. It's Microsoft Identity Web. It's out in NuGet already. We're adding support for that to our ASP.NET Core templates in 5.0. And we're going to backport it to 3.1 hopefully shortly thereafter. At least that's our plan today. But the current, plan of record is to use the awesomeness that the identity team built with Microsoft Identity Web and our new templates. Now, if you are building REST APIs, the other thing you're going to need is Swagger or OpenAPI specification documents. We've worked closely with the Swashbuckle folks to make sure they're comfortable with the us kind of hinging off the presence of them in a project to light up our API publishing stuff. But, you still have to, right click, add NuGet dependency, know how to type swashbuckle.ASP.NET Core, yada, yada, yada. Then you have to know like the 2 code changes you need to make in Startup CS. They're very particular and they don't have any parameters, but you have to know them. So we're just going to put that in the template for you.
Awesome.
So when you think about the end-to-end experience for building a REST API that you use inside of a Power App or a Blazor app or anything else, we're going to help you out with the authentication, and we're going to help you out with the OpenAPI description generation by default. Like that'll be in there. I can't give you a time frame on it. We're hoping that we land it all by 5, but you can tell that's a lot of stuff. But if you think about the amount of work that we're taking off your plate, you can literally file a project and get going. It's a lot easier. And then the publish stuff is easier. And then inside of Visual Studio, if you're a VS user, which we all are, we have some really great features in the 16.7 release in our what's called the Connected Services dialog. You can literally double click on Connected Services and you see all the dependencies for your project. It'll do things like automatically detect that you have Cosmos DB NuGet reference. So it will tell you, well, I don't see a connection string. Do you want me to make that for you? And you click a button and it works. It's way easier to if you think about you and I working on a project together, I say clone it and then use this resource group. You would know what to do. You know what I mean? So that's a lot easier.
Nice.
We're getting out of your way, I guess. That's a good way to put it.
Well, that's going to be huge because and this is another prediction. I predict that more and more APIs are going to come online among .NET developers because with .NET 5, with Blazor WebAssembly, with the transformation of Xamarin and making it easier and more native to do C# mobile applications, tablet applications. Mm-hmm. People want to develop and use the richest application that they can without creating unnecessary friction. And so web applications, we do web applications because what? Because we control it. We can say, let's deploy the new version and everybody gets the new version. If you do, packaged software, it's like you deploy a new version, but now you got to think, oh, did people upgrade?
Yeah.
And so with app stores, it's like, did people upgrade? I don't know. Yeah. And so for most business applications, it's no. We need to control that people have upgraded.
Yeah.
And so more and more of these technologies in the .NET 5 era give the development team control over making sure that everybody's now on the new version.
Oh yeah. And Project Tie, last week we did the microservice stuff, the microservice focus on .NET Comp. Fowler showed how you can do top level programs with C# with .NET 5 and new C# language. And what we can do is you could literally, instead of having, a class called program with a static void main and a bunch of stuff, you can literally just say webapplication.create, handle a Lambda, and put it in program CS. There's your microservice. You're done. .NET build it and you're ready to go.
A C# script file.
Yeah. It's what it looks like, but it's not. It actually compiles into an assembly. Sounds pretty fun.
Right.
But that's all it is. Imagine just now your API repository is a list of C# files in one big Tie YAML file. You know what I mean? I was impressed with how Tie so easily you do all the API discovery stuff. He was just asking, if you watched the keynote from last week with Hunter and Fowler, we would literally just say configuration give me the URL, and it would give you the URL for the service that you named that was in the Tie YAML file. You'd have 100 services in there. It knows how to route everything and knows the dynamic reporting and everything. It's great.
Nice. Nice. Hey, I say this every decade. It's a good time to be in development, but it continues to be.
It's awesome.
Always. That's right. It never gets old. Well, hey, is there anything else that maybe the listeners should jump onto immediately? We've talked about so many things. Any of the resources you want to plug before we close out?
I would just tell everybody, continue to use Microsoft Learn because we've got a great smattering of Learn content out there. We've definitely harnessed the whole virtual eventing thing. I think in the last month, I've been involved with 2 full-day virtual events. So that's 2 to 3 days of content that's already out there for you to go watch on how to use microservices to build Power Apps. There's a lot of exciting content out there. So I would definitely continue to engage that channel and learn more every day. And just, continue coming together and don't let this stuff get you down. We've got a lot of new stuff to party with, and Ignite's coming up soon. So we're going to have even more there. But there's a lot of new app models coming out, if you think about using Teams as an application ecosystem and the stuff we're doing in Power Apps, it really is a great time to be a dev.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Brady, thanks so much for coming on the show. This is great information you share with us. I learn new things as I do always. Appreciate it.
No problem. It was a lot of fun, man. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. And until next time, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure DevOps Podcast, a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Go to www.azuredevops.show for show notes and other episodes. On behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, and our sponsors, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.